Imagine, just for a moment, that you are lying on an operating table.
Yeah.
The surgeon is standing right over you, scalpel in hand. But there's no IV drip of general anesthesia.
Right. No ether mask, no spinal block.
Exactly. Just a person speaking really calmly to you, guiding your focus while your body undergoes major surgery. And you feel absolutely nothing but this, profound floating euphoria.
I mean, it sounds like an exaggerated myth or maybe some deeply esoteric ancient ritual, but the medical logs from the 1840s in India are incredibly meticulous and they're very real.
Yeah, a Scottish surgeon named James Esdale was performing amputations and, massive tumor removals exactly like this, decades before chemical anesthesia was even standard practice.
Which just begs the question, right? How is that biologically possible?
Exactly, because for centuries people thought it was magic or invisible magnetic fluids or just some kind of psychological parlor trick.
Yeah, because usually when we talk about a medical procedure, there's this expectation of mechanical precision. You can cut, the nerves fire, the brain registers pain. It's supposed to be completely binary.
Right. A causes B.
Yeah.
We definitely prefer our biology to be predictable like that.
We do. But when you step into the world of altered states of consciousness, that rigid mechanical view completely falls apart. I mean, we are looking at a landscape that is far more dynamic.
Where the mind doesn't just, receive signals from the body, but actively dictates how those signals are processed.
Exactly. It's a two-way street.
And that mystery is exactly what we are unpacking today. Welcome to this deep dive. Today, we're taking a massive journey through the evolution of altered states of consciousness.
It's going to be a wild one.
It really is. Our mission is to trace how humanity moved from believing in those mystical, invisible fluids we mentioned to mapping the hard structural neurobiology of the human brain.
And we are diving into two exhaustively detailed clinical manuals today. They cover guided meditation, hypnotherapy, their historical trajectories, and some truly cutting-edge neurobiological research plans.
Yeah, and what makes these sources so compelling is that they aren't just recounting history. They're actually attempting to bridge a massive gap in our understanding.
Right. They want to explain the exact cellular and network-level changes that happen when a person enters a trance or meditates deeply.
And look, if you're listening to this right now, I know you want the real aha moments without drowning in all the academic jargon. So we are going to break this all down for you.
By the end of this deep dive, you are going to understand the exact biological mechanisms behind how a person could undergo surgery without anesthesia.
Which is still hard to wrap my head around.
Yeah.
But you'll also see how practices like mindfulness-based stress reduction literally, physically rewire your brain's hardware.
It really is an incredible journey from mysticism to hard neuroscience. But to understand how we got to measuring brainwaves and mapping neural networks, we actually have to start with where this whole field began.
Oh yeah, we have to go way back to the 18th century, to an Austrian physician named Franz Anton Mesmer.
Mesmer, the grandfather of modern altered states.
Basically, yeah. But he didn't call it hypnosis or meditation, did he? He called it animal magnetism.
Animal magnetism, right. And Mesmer is a fascinating product of his time. You really have to remember the scientific zeitgeist of the late 1700s.
The era of invisible forces.
Exactly. The world was just beginning to understand these invisible forces that dictate reality. Newton had codified gravity. Electricity was just being explored.
So people were primed for this kind of thinking.
Totally. So Mesmer postulated that there must be another invisible magnetic fluid flowing through all living beings and, well, indeed, the entire universe.
And according to him, physical and mental illnesses were the direct result of blockages in this fluid, right?
That was his theory.
I mean, it sounds completely wild now, but at the time, if gravity is an invisible force pulling planets, why could there be an invisible fluid making you sick?
It followed a certain logic for the 1700s. But his treatments were pure theatrical spectacle.
Oh, the drama was next level. He had this thing called a baquet, right? Which was basically a wooden tub filled with magnetized water and iron rods.
Yes. Patients would sit around it and hold the rods, and Mesmer would come out in these flowing silk robes using actual magnets and making these dramatic, sweeping hand passes over his patients.
To, physically manipulate this invisible fluid.
Right. And the results, from a purely clinical observation standpoint, were undeniable. I mean, people were claiming they were cured of all sorts of ailments.
That they were having these intense reactions, right? The crises.
Yes. He would induce these wild convulsions in his patients, which he called crises. The belief was that the crisis was the physical manifestation of the blockage breaking.
Like breaking a dam so the fluid could flow naturally again. But Spoiler alert, it wasn't the fluid. And this leads to one of my all-time favorite moments in scientific history.
The French Royal Commission.
Yes. In 1784, King Louis VI assembles this commission to investigate mesmer. And the roster is like the Avengers of 18th century science.
It really was a powerhouse group.
You have Benjamin Franklin, who was the U.S. ambassador to France at the time. You have Antoine Lavoisier, the father of modern chemistry. You even have Dr. Joseph Ignace Guillotin.
They were tasked with determining if this magnetic fluid actually existed. And to do it, they devised some of the earliest recorded blind clinical trials.
Let's talk about those tests, because they were absolutely brilliant. They took Mesmer's patients out into Benjamin Franklin's garden.
Right. They systematically isolated the variables. So first, they told patients they were being magnetized from behind a screen when they actually weren't.
Well, what happened?
The patients still had violent convulsions.
Just from the belief that it was happening.
Exactly. Then they brought patients out to the garden and secretly magnetized specific trees. The patients were told a different tree was magnetized.
Oh, this is the best part.
Right. The patients only convulsed when they approached the non-magnetized tree that they believed was magnetized.
So they completely shattered the mechanism. Benjamin Franklin basically proved that the magnetic fluid did not exist at all.
The commission's conclusion was devastating for Mesmer. They stated the effects were entirely due to imagination, imitation, and the power of suggestion.
Mesmer was completely disgraced. But the phenomena he was producing, the cures, the trances, they didn't just disappear. The clinical effects were still happening.
Which forced his successors to look for a completely different explanation. And one of his prominent followers, the Marquis de Puysegur, made a really crucial pivot.
Because he realized you didn't actually need the dramatic convulsions, right?
Exactly. Puysegur found that if he altered his approach, he didn't need to induce a violent crisis to get results. He discovered what he termed artificial somnambulism.
Which is more like what we think of today.
Right. A profound, peaceful, sleep-like trance where the patient remained highly suggestible and focused, but completely calm.
So we move from violent shaking to a peaceful trance.
Yeah.
But they are still thinking it's something the operator is doing to the patient.
Until a guy named Abbé Faria comes along and completely flips the script.
Okay, tell us about Faria.
Faria was arguably the most revolutionary figure in this early era. He completely discarded the magnetic fluid theory, and he even discarded the idea that the operator had any special power whatsoever.
Wow.
He introduced the radical concept that the trance state was generated entirely from within the subject's mind.
Okay, this is a massive paradigm shift. It's almost like a reverse nocebo effect.
How so?
Well, if you believe something will harm you, your body creates stress, right? Faria is saying, if you believe this process will induce a trance, your mind generates the trance. It's driven entirely by the patient's expectancy and cooperation.
Yes. The operator is just a guide. The subject is doing the actual neurological work.
But I have to push back here for a second. If Franklin and Lavoisier knew it was just imagination and expectancy way back in 1784, how does that translate to actual measurable biology?
What do you mean?
Because imagination sounds incredibly flimsy compared to, say, James Esdale cutting off a limb with a scalpel. How does a thought turn into a physical shield against a blade?
That is the pivotal question. It's a leap from psychology to physiology. And to bridge that gap, the clinical manuals detail a fundamental sensory suggestibility test used by practitioners today. It's called the Lemon test.
Yes, I saw this in the notes.
It demonstrates exactly how cognitive expectancy forces a biological reaction.
If you are listening right now, try this, obviously, unless you're driving.
Right, safety first.
Imagine a bright yellow lemon in your hand. Feel the waxy, dimpled skin. Now imagine putting it on a cutting board, taking a sharp knife and slicing it right in half. See the little droplets of juice spray into the air.
Really visualize it.
Now pick up a wedge, bring it to your mouth, and take a massive bite of the sour flesh. Let the juice completely coat your tongue.
Now, if you are actively visualizing that and truly engaging your sensory memory, there is a very high probability that you just started to salivate.
Your mouth is physically producing extra saliva right now. It absolutely is. Just reading it earlier made my jaw tingle.
Now, let's break down the neurobiology of what just happened to you. You are fully aware there is no lemon.
Right. It's a complete fabrication.
But the salivary response isn't controlled by your conscious logic. It's driven by the superior and inferior salivatory nuclei, which are located in the medulla oblongata deep in your brainstem.
So my conscious brain says, this is a thought experiment, but my brainstem says, nope, sour food incoming, start the engines.
Precisely. By simply imagining the lemon vividly enough, you created hyperconnectivity between your visual cortex, where the image was generated, and your brainstem's autonomic regulatory centers.
Your cognitive expectation directly dictated a biological glandular response.
Okay, but salivating at a lemon is just a basic reflex. I mean, that is miles away from blocking out the pain of an amputation. How does a salivary reflex prove we can literally turn off a pain receptor?
Well, it doesn't prove we can turn off a pain receptor directly, but it establishes the foundational mechanism. Your thoughts can manipulate your autonomic nervous system.
It's the proof of concept.
Yes, the lemon test is just a baseline. To understand how that translates to a scalpel, we have to look at what happened in the 1840s, when a Scottish surgeon finally gave this phenomenon a biological framework.
Enter James Braid, the father of modern hypnotism. It's the 1840s, and Braid is watching a traveling mesmerist named La Fontaine.
And Braid is a skeptical man of science.
Very skeptical. But as he watches, he realizes this isn't magic, and it's not fluid. He identifies a specific physiological trigger.
Braid observed that the trance wasn't induced by the operator's magical passes, but rather by what the patient was doing with their eyes.
Interesting.
He noted that trance was consistently induced by protracted ocular fixation, meaning they were staring intensely at a bright object like a pocket watch or a crystal.
Yes. Braid theorized that staring at an object positioned slightly above the eye line fatigued the levator palpebrae superioris muscle in the eyelid, and more importantly, it fatigued the optic nerve.
So it's about sensory exhaustion.
Exactly. This sustained sensory overload essentially tired out specific parts of the brain, leading to a state of profound physiological relaxation and hyperfocus.
So the brain basically gets tired of processing this intense singular visual input and just downshifts. And Braid coined a new term for this, right? Neurohypnotism.
He combined the Greek god of sleep, hypnos, with the nervous system. He believed it was a nervous sleep.
But the manuals point out that he actually tried to walk that name back later.
He did. As he studied it further, Braid realized the state was fundamentally distinct from natural sleep.
Because they were still aware.
Exactly. The subjects were entirely aware, their cognitive faculties were acute, they were just deeply, intensely focused on one thing. So he tried to change the name from hypnotism to monoideism.
Monoideism, meaning concentration on a single idea.
Yes. But it was too late. The term hypnosis had already permanently embedded itself into the scientific and public lexicon.
I mean, monoideism is a mouthful, but concentration on a single idea makes so much more sense for a new learner trying to grasp this. It isn't sleep. It's a laser beam of focus.
It's a much more accurate description.
But Braid's biological explanation didn't exactly settle the debate, did it?
Yeah.
It actually set off a massive faction war in the late 19th century.
Oh, a bitter theoretical divide within the French medical establishment. On one side, you had the Nancy School, led by Hippolyte Bernheim and Ambroise Auguste Liebau.
And what was their stance?
They built upon Braid's perspective, arguing that hypnosis was a completely normal psychological phenomenon based on suggestion. They believed it was a natural human capacity that anyone could access.
And on the other side?
You had the Salpêtrière School in Paris, led by the incredibly famous neurologist Jean-Martin Charcot.
Why did Charcot disagree? What was his theory?
Charcot's worldview was shaped by his patient population. He worked primarily with patients suffering from hysteria and epilepsy.
Okay.
And he observed that many of these patients were highly hypnotizable. Because of this correlation, he erroneously concluded that hypnosis was a somatic pathology.
Wait, a pathology?
Yes, he thought it was inextricably linked to hysteria, meaning only a neurologically sick or pathological brain could be hypnotized.
That is a wild conclusion. One side says, this is a superpower of normal human focus, and the other says, if you can be hypnotized, you have a diseased brain.
It was a very heated debate.
Thankfully, the Nancy School won that one. The suggestion-based normal human capacity model prevailed. But wait, if Braid proved it was intense physiological focus, and the Nancy School proved it was normal, why did it fall out of favor? The manuals mention Sigmund Freud completely abandoned it.
Freud is a pivotal, almost ironic figure in this history. In his early career, he used hypnosis to try and uncover repressed memories.
Right, that was his whole thing.
But Freud, by his own admission, wasn't a very good hypnotist. Yeah. He found the induction process tedious, and he struggled immensely with resistant patients who wouldn't enter a trance.
So because he was bad at it, he just dropped it.
He abandoned it in favor of free association, where the patient just talks freely on a couch, which became the bedrock of psychoanalysis.
Wow.
But Freud, stepping away, actually did the field a massive favor. It opened the door for two 20th century titans to completely revolutionize the mechanics of the practice.
They transformed it from a clunky Victorian curiosity into a precise, highly effective clinical tool.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the clinical revolution. Yeah. We're talking about Milton H. Erickson and Dave Ellman. If you read anything about modern altered states, these two guys basically built the framework.
They are the absolute pioneers.
Let's start with Erickson, because his approach was completely different from the old look into my eyes authoritarian style. Right. It was, well, sneaky, but therapeutically sneaky.
Covert and permissive are the terms used in the manuals. Erickson realized that direct authoritarian commands like "you will sleep now" often triggered psychological reactance.
Meaning, the conscious mind naturally wants to rebel against being controlled. Like, if you tell me to do something, my ego wants to do the exact opposite.
Exactly. So he developed what is now known as the Milton model. It utilizes highly ambiguous language, metaphors, and storytelling to completely bypass the brain's critical faculty.
My absolute favorite part of the Milton model is the double bind.
It's so effective.
It's the illusion of choice. Instead of saying, go into a trance, Erickson would say something like, would you prefer to enter a trance now? Or would you like to keep your eyes open for a few more moments?
Let's analyze what is structurally happening in that sentence. Why does that work so well?
Well, he's giving the conscious mind a choice. The ego gets to say, I'm in control, I'll choose to wait a few moments.
Right.
But the underlying premise that you're inevitably going into a trance slips right past the defenses. You've already agreed to the outcome just by answering the question.
It is a brilliant example of cognitive load manipulation. By forcing the working memory to evaluate multiple overlapping semantic options now versus later, the conscious mind is distracted.
It's busy doing the math.
While it is busy doing the math on which choice to make to preserve its autonomy, the embedded command slips undetected into the implicit processing pathways of the limbic system.
It's literally social engineering for the brain.
It really is.
Now, compare that smooth, winding, covert style to Dave Ellman. Ellman didn't have time for long stories about tomatoes growing in a field.
No, he was teaching medical and dental professionals who needed their patients anesthetized right now.
Right. So he developed a rapid 4-minute induction, and the manuals walk through his 4 specific steps, which are basically direct biological hacks.
Ellman's induction is a masterpiece of systematic physiological compliance. It forces the nervous system into a corner.
Walk us through it.
Step 1 is eyelid catalepsy. He tells the patient to relax the muscles around their eyes so deeply that they simply won't work, and then, while holding on to that relaxation, to test them.
Which is another double bind. You are asking the patient to actively try to open their eyes while simultaneously holding a subconscious directive that prevents them from doing so.
And what happens?
When they try and fail to open their eyes, they realize, whoa, this is real. I actually can't.
That realization deepens the expectancy immensely. Step 2 is vote fractionation. Ellman has them rapidly open and close their eyes, going deeper into relaxation each time they close them.
Okay, I have to ask about this. Opening and closing your eyelids seems so trivial. Why does that push someone deeper into a trance?
It is about context switching and glucose depletion in the prefrontal cortex. Think of the brain's working memory like RAM in a computer.
Yeah.
Every time you open your eyes, your brain has to reorient to the waking reality, the lights, the room, the operator. That takes immense executive processing power.
It's constantly rendering the room.
Exactly. When you immediately close them again and go back inward, you shift networks. Doing this rapidly over and over causes metabolic fatigue.
So you are basically maxing out the brain's RAM until it crashes.
You are exhausting the brain's executive resources, essentially forcing the brain to surrender to a less energy-intensive state just to conserve resources. It's a biological forced downshift.
That is wild.
Step 3 then verifies this with a physical test lifting and dropping the arm to ensure it's completely limp, verifying physical somnambulism.
And then comes step 4, which completely blew my mind, the number block.
This is a fascinating neurological hack.
He has the patient count backward from 100, but tells them to relax their minds so much that the numbers fade away and disappear. And by 97, the numbers are just gone. They physically cannot speak them. How is that even possible?
It presents observationally as amnesia, but it's actually temporary aphasia. The suggestion to let them fade actively suppresses the working memory buffers in the prefrontal cortex and inhibits the expressive language centers in Broca's area.
Broca's area is the part of the brain that formulates speech, right?
Correct. The induction creates a localized, reversible neural inhibition. The concept of the number 97 might still exist somewhere in the semantic network, but the mechanical pathway required to articulate it is temporarily taken offline.
Okay, so you have Erickson bypassing the ego with language and Ellman hacking the biology with fatigue and aphasia. They are proving this works clinically every single day in the 20th century.
They had massive success rates.
But academia was still ripping itself apart over how it actually worked. The manuals dedicate a huge section to the state versus non-state debate.
It was a monumental theoretical conflict that lasted for decades. On one side, you had Ernest Hilgard proposing the neo-dissociation theory. This was a state theory.
And what did that mean?
He argued that hypnosis induces a distinct neurologically altered state of consciousness by creating an amnesic barrier.
What does that mean, an amnesic barrier?
He theorized that hypnosis literally splits the executive control system, meaning a part of your brain executes a suggestion like ignoring pain, but your conscious awareness is walled off from knowing how it's doing it.
This is where he talked about the hidden observer, right?
Yes, Hilgard ran fascinating experiments with freezing water baths. A hypnotized subject would hold their arm in ice water and claim to feel zero pain.
Which is already impressive.
But Hilgard found that he could tap into a hidden observer, part of their mind, via automatic writing. While the person was verbally saying, "I feel fine," their other hand would physically write out that the pain was agonizing.
That is terrifying and amazing. The pain registered in the body, but the suffering was completely dissociated from consciousness.
Precisely. That was the state argument. Now, on the other side, you had the non-state theorists, sociocognitive researchers like Nicholas Spanos and Irving Kirsch.
And what was their angle?
They argue that there is no unique, distinct trance state at all.
Wait, then how did they explain the ice water? Or the surgeries?
They claimed hypnosis is simply role enactment, social compliance, and response expectancy. They argued that the subject is merely acting how they think a hypnotized person should act in that cultural context.
Like they're just playing along.
Right. And because they strongly expect a result, their biology complies very much like a placebo effect. There's no amnesic barrier, just a highly motivated person playing a role.
Okay, I have to stop here. I cannot buy the non-state argument. It makes zero sense to me.
It has a lot of critics.
I mean, I have a really hard time believing someone like James Esdale could perform major amputations in India without anesthesia just because the patient was role-playing or being socially compliant. Nobody role-plays their way through a bone saw.
Exactly.
What is physically happening in the brain that makes that possible?
Your skepticism is incredibly valid, and it's the exact frustration that drove researchers to finally look inside the living brain. For decades, the state versus non-state argument was just a philosophical debate based on behavioral observation.
Because they couldn't see the brain working.
Right. But the advent of modern neuroimaging finally allowed us to look under the hood and declare a winner.
And the winner is?
The state theory is correct. Hypnosis is not just role-playing. It is a measurable, distinct, physiological, altered state.
And this was proven by Dr. David Spiegel at Stanford University. The manual breaks down his fMRI research.
His work is completely foundational.
He put highly hypnotizable people into brain scanners and watched what their neural networks did in real time while they went into a trance. And he found 3 massive hallmark neural shifts.
Yeah.
This is the core biology of altered states.
Let's go through them because they explain everything from the profound focus to the pain relief we just talked about.
All right, shift number 1, the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex, or the DACC. What is this and what happens to it?
The DACC is a critical node of the brain's salience network. Think of the salience network as your brain's radar system.
Okay.
Its primary job is to constantly scan your environment for threats and decide what stimuli deserve your attention. If you hear a sudden loud noise, or if you start worrying about a deadline tomorrow, your DACC is firing.
It's the part of the brain that keeps us anxious and hypervigilant.
Exactly. And Dr. Spiegel's fMRI scans show that during hypnosis, the DACC profoundly downregulates. The radar system literally powers down. The brain stops scanning the external environment for threats. This neurological suppression correlates perfectly with the intense absorption and focus characteristic of a trance. The external world simply falls away.
Which explains why Braid called it concentration on a single idea. The distractions are physically turned off.
Exactly.
Okay, shift number 2, and this is the big one, the one that explains Esdale's painless surgery. It's the connection between the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex, the DLPFC, and the insula.
Let's define the anatomy first. The DLPFC is the seat of executive function, cognitive processing, and working memory. It's the conscious you.
Right.
The insula is deep inside the brain. It is an integration center that processes internal bodily sensations, autonomic functions, and importantly, pain perception.
And during hypnosis, what happens between them?
The fMRI shows increased functional connectivity between these two regions. They start communicating with each other far more than they do in normal waking consciousness.
But wait, if they're communicating more, wouldn't you feel the pain more?
No, because this increased connectivity facilitates top-down sensory control. The executive brain gains the ability to cognitively modulate physiological responses.
Oh, I see.
The pain signal from the scalpel still travels up the spinal cord to the brain.
Oh boy.
We aren't numbing the physical nerve ending like Novocaine does, but the executive network intercepts that signal at the insula and essentially says, we acknowledge this sensation, but we are not going to attach any emotional suffering, distress, or panic to it.
That is incredible. The signal arrives, but the brain refuses to read the email. That is hypnotic analgesia.
Precisely. It is a functional interception of the pain pathway.
All right, shift number 3, and this one is fascinating for anyone interested in mental health. The DLPFC decouples from the default mode network.
The DMN, yes.
We need to spend a minute on the default mode network because this is basically the narrator in our heads, right?
It is much more than a narrator. It's a threat simulator. The DMN is a network of interacting brain regions that is hyperactive during self-referential thinking, mind-wandering, and ego-driven rumination.
Like when you're replaying an argument in the shower.
Exactly. It is your critical inner voice. When you are replaying an embarrassing conversation from 5 years ago or projecting anxiety into the future, your DMN is running those simulations to keep you safe.
It's the ego. It's the part of you that says, I can't do this. I'm not good enough. This won't work.
Yes. And Spiegel proved that during hypnosis, the executive control network physically unplugs from the DMN. The connection is severed.
That sounds so peaceful.
It is. The inner critic goes completely offline. You suspend self-consciousness.
Which is why a subject can accept a new therapeutic suggestion like you will no longer crave cigarettes without the usual cognitive friction or self-doubt. The firewall is down.
And you have to add to this the neurochemical cascade. The manuals detail. It's not just structural, it's chemical.
Right. There's a massive drop in cortisol, the stress hormone, and spikes in GABA, which causes relaxation.
Plus dopamine for reward and endorphins, which are the brain's natural opioids causing that pain relief.
When you synthesize all of that data, the downregulated radar, the intercepted pain, the unplugged ego, and the chemical flood, you have a complete biological picture of an altered state.
It's incredibly comprehensive.
So if I'm trying to visualize this,
Yeah.
it sounds like hypnosis acts as a temporary software patch.
I like that.
Yeah, you take a computer that is glitching, you unplug the network cables, the DMN, you bypass the firewall, install new behavioral code, and then plug it all back together.
That is an incredibly accurate analogy. Hypnosis is a highly efficient, transient, functional software patch. It changes how the brain processes information in the moment.
But it's temporary.
Yes. But if we accept that hypnosis dynamically alters the flow of information, the next major historical evolution proved that meditation acts as a structural upgrade to the actual physical hardware of the brain.
And this brings us to a major pivot in the manuals. If hypnosis is a temporary state, is there a way to make these neurological benefits a permanent physiological trait?
Which is the ultimate goal.
Right. And the question brings us to John Kabat-Zinn. In 1979, at the University of Massachusetts, he sparked the secularization of meditation.
Kabat-Zinn is a highly influential figure. He was a molecular biologist who also deeply practiced Zen Buddhism and Hatha Yoga.
But he saw a problem with how it was being presented.
He understood the profound mental benefits of ancient Vipassana meditation, but he also knew that the Western medical establishment would never prescribe a religious practice to patients.
So he stripped it down. He removed all the esoteric language, the dogma, the religious frameworks, and he turned it into an 8-week secular, scientifically validated clinical intervention called mindfulness-based stress reduction, or MBSR.
By removing the religious lexicon, he allowed the medical and scientific community to study it objectively. And the data from those longitudinal studies is absolutely staggering.
Specifically, we need to look at the MRI research conducted by Dr. Sarah Lazar at Harvard University.
Her work is groundbreaking.
She looked at what happens to the physical structure of the brain after 8 weeks of daily MBSR meditation. And this is where we go from software to hardware. The brain physically changes its shape.
Yes. Lazar's team used a technique called voxel-based morphometry to measure gray matter density.
Hold on, let's unpack that. What exactly is voxel-based morphometry?
Think of a voxel as a three-dimensional pixel in a brain scan. Morphometry is the measurement of form. So voxel-based morphometry allows software to compare thousands of these 3D pixels across different brain scans to measure micro changes in the volume and density of brain tissue over time.
So they're literally measuring if the brain is getting thicker or thinner in specific areas.
Exactly.
And what did they find?
They found that MBSR literally shrinks the amygdala.
The amygdala being the brain's primary threat detection center, the fight-or-flight panic button.
Correct. After just 8 weeks of mindfulness practice, the physical mass of the fear center decreases. And this structural shrinkage directly correlates with the subject's self-reported reductions in daily stress and anxiety.
The hardware generating the fear actually got smaller. That is wild.
But it doesn't just shrink the bad stuff, it bulks up the good stuff.
Right. The manuals show increased cortical thickness in the left hippocampus. What does the left hippocampus do?
The hippocampus is crucial for learning, memory consolidation, and emotional regulation. By thickening it, you are literally expanding the brain's capacity to process and store information calmly.
They also noted growth in the anterior insula and the temporoparietal junction, or TPJ.
The TPJ is a fascinating region. It is heavily associated with empathy, compassion, and perspective-taking.
Which means what, exactly?
It's the part of the brain that allows you to understand that someone else has a different state of mind than you do.
So you meditate for 8 weeks, and your brain physically grows more empathetic hardware. That is neuroplasticity in action. You are literally weightlifting for the prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus.
It even offsets age-related cortical thinning. Typically, as we age, our frontal cortex thins out. Lazar found that 50-year-old meditators had the same cortical thickness as 25-year-olds.
Okay, wait. I pointed this out in my notes because it just jumped off the page. The manuals explicitly mention a missing link here, like a massive gap in the current scientific literature.
Yes, the intersection of the two fields.
Exactly. If hypnosis is dynamically altering the flow of information to solve a specific issue, the software patch in MBSR is physically bulking up the brain's anatomy over time. The hardware upgrade, what happens when they overlap?
It's the golden question.
Can deep, regular hypnosis cause long-term structural neuroplasticity?
That is the exact frontier these clinical manuals are trying to map. Right now, the scientific community treats these domains largely separately, hypnosis as a functional transient state, and meditation as a trait-altering structural practice.
They target the same areas, don't they?
That's just it. If you look at the imaging, both modalities heavily modulate the exact same neural territories. The default mode network, the insula, the prefrontal cortex, the amygdala.
So the manuals propose an exhaustive research plan to finally bridge these fields.
Yes. They propose phase 1, 2, and 3 research trials aimed at mapping the biological markers of extreme altered states that, frankly, still remain entirely shrouded in mystery.
Let's venture into that research frontier, because some of these states sound like magic until you put an EEG on them.
They really do sound unbelievable.
The manuals use something called the Aron's depth scale to measure how deep a trance is, right? From light relaxation to profound somnambulism, but then they go past the scale into what they call ultra-depth states.
Yes, these are states that ostensibly exist far beyond profound somnambulism. The manuals argue that these states require rigorous polysomnographic quantification, meaning measuring brain waves, eye movements, and muscle activity simultaneously to truly understand what is happening biologically.
Let's talk about the first one, the Esdale state, or hypnotic coma, named after the surgeon from India we talked about at the beginning.
The clinical markers of the Esdale state are fascinating. It features spontaneous, whole-body anesthesia.
Meaning you don't even have to suggest it.
Right. The hypnotist never suggests pain relief. The anesthesia just naturally occurs as a byproduct of the depth. The subject experiences profound euphoria, often resisting emerging from the trance because it feels so restorative, and most bizarrely, they exhibit waxy catalepsy.
Waxy catalepsy. I read the description of this. That means if the hypnotist lifts the patient's arm into the air, the arm just freezes there, suspended in space.
Yes, exactly.
Locks into place without the patient making any conscious effort to hold it up.
Observationally, it is striking. But neurologically, we don't know the exact mechanism yet. The manuals hypothesize heavily. Is it a massive descending inhibitory signal from the periaqueductal gray in the midbrain, blocking the spinal nociceptors.
The periaqueductal gray, that's the brain's primary control center for descending pain modulation.
Correct. But even if that explains the anesthesia, it doesn't explain the waxy catalepsy. What is happening at the neuromuscular junction to maintain that rigid muscle tone without the motor cortex actively firing commands to hold the arm up?
That's what the proposed research aims to find out. Then there is the Secort state. This one sounds straight out of a biohacking forum. It's described as a waking REM state.
REM, or rapid eye movement, is typically only seen in deep sleep architecture, where the body is paralyzed and we dream. But in the Secort state, the subject is awake and responsive, their body is completely devoid of residual muscular tension, and they experience massive time distortion.
And what's the benefit of that?
Proponents of this state claim it facilitates rapid physiological regeneration.
But how can you have REM while you're awake?
That is the mystery. Without polysomnographic evidence showing how pontogeniculo-occipital waves, PGO waves, are triggered in a waking brain, it remains a clinical anomaly.
Wait, pontogeniculo what waves?
Pontogeniculo-occipital waves.
Okay, break that down for me.
These are electrical spikes that originate in the pons, which is in the brainstem, travel through the lateral geniculate nucleus in the thalamus, and end up in the occipital lobe at the back of the brain, which processes vision.
This is a specific neural pathway.
Yes. These waves are the exact mechanism of how we see visual dreams while we are asleep.
So if a waking person is having PGO waves, they are essentially dreaming while conscious. That breaks the normal rules of sleep biology.
Which is exactly why the authors of the manual are demanding rigorous clinical trials to measure it.
And the final ultra-depth state they mention, which is wild for therapy, the Simpson Protocol. This is designed for when a client is in the Esdale state, that hypnotic coma, and physically won't speak because their vocal cords are too relaxed and they are too comfortable.
Right, they just don't want to talk.
So it uses ideomotor finger signaling.
Ideomotor signaling completely bypasses conscious language and Broca's area. The hypnotist asks a question, and the client's finger physically twitches to signal yes or no entirely involuntarily.
And the manual says this protocol connects to the Superconscious, which, frankly, sounds very woo-woo.
It is a highly esoteric term, and the research plan specifically aims to strip that mystical terminology away using fMRI.
Oh, good. So what's the scientific theory?
The working biological hypothesis is that the Simpson Protocol is actually communicating with the brain's implicit memory networks, likely heavily involving the basal ganglia and the right hemisphere.
So instead of a mystical superconscious, it's just the brain's deep storage.
Exactly. It allows the client's internal neurological assets to do content-free trauma work.
Content-free?
Yes, meaning the conscious mind of the patient and even the therapist don't need to know the specific details of the traumatic event. The explicit memory doesn't have to be relived or spoken about. The brain heals itself implicitly.
Okay, all of this ultra-depth PGO wave, basal ganglia stuff is mind-bending, but I want to bring it back to you, the listener. How can you use this neuroscience today, right now, in your own life?
Because you don't need an fMRI machine or a hypnotist to access these networks.
Exactly. The manual details a highly practical, everyday takeaway. The Betty Erickson 3-2-1 technique for self-hypnosis and non-sleep deep rest.
Betty Erickson was the wife and primary collaborator of Milton Erickson. Her technique is a masterpiece of applied cognitive neuroscience. It is deceptively simple, but incredibly powerful.
Let's walk through the mechanics of it. You sit quietly. You look around the room and mentally name 3 things you can see, 3 things you can hear, and 3 things you can physically feel.
It's all about sensory grounding.
Right. So I see the lamp, I see the window, I see my shoe, I hear the traffic, I hear the fridge humming, I hear my breath, I feel my feet on the floor, I feel the chair against my back, I feel my watch on my wrist. Then you immediately do it again, but with 2 things. Then 1 thing.
By the time you reach 1, your eyes typically want to close, and you smoothly transition into a naturalistic trance state, a profound parasympathetic resting state. But the mechanics of why it works are brilliant.
I looked at this, and a modern analogy immediately jumped out at me. The 3-2-1 technique is essentially a DDoS attack on your own anxiety.
A distributed denial of service attack. That is a perfect framework. Expand on that for the listener, because I love that.
Okay, so your working memory has a limited buffer, right? It can only hold so much information at once.
Very true.
When you are having a panic attack or you are spiraling with stress, that buffer is filled with threat simulations from your default mode network.
It's running all those worst-case scenarios.
Exactly. But by forcing your conscious mind to rapidly scan, identify, and verbalize specific external sensory data across 3 different channels, visual, auditory, and kinesthetic, You are deliberately flooding your own working memory.
You're overloading the system on purpose.
Yes. You push so much mundane, harmless data into the RAM that the panic program simply crashes. The brain has no processing power left to maintain the anxiety loop.
Precisely. You are intentionally overloading the executive network with neutral stimuli. This sends a powerful bottom-up signal to the amygdala that the immediate environment is completely safe, which forces a neurological downshift into the parasympathetic nervous system.
It's a perfect encapsulation of how understanding the hard mechanics of the mind gives you the power to control it.
It's biological self-regulation.
So if we step back and connect all of this to the bigger picture, we've gone on quite a journey today. We started with Mesmer's theatrical magnets, invisible fluids, and convulsions.
The Baquet and the silk robe.
Yeah. And then we saw James Braid strip away the magic and realize it was physiological fatigue and ocular focus. We watched Erickson and Ellman turn that focus into clinical mastery using double blinds and working memory overload.
And then we saw the modern validation. Dr. Spiegel using fMRI to prove the physical software patches, the decoupling of the DMN, and the downregulation of the threat radar.
And finally, Kabat-Zinn and Dr. Lazar proving that with consistent practice, we can upgrade the physical hardware of the brain, shrinking our fear centers and expanding our empathy.
The overarching takeaway from all these manuals, all this history, and all this data is profoundly empowering. Your brain is not a fixed, rigid machine.
It is a highly neuroplastic organ.
It is incredibly responsive to focused attention, cognitive expectancy, and directed imagery.
You are not simply a passive receiver of reality. You are an active architect of your neurological state.
You are not stuck with the brain you woke up with today.
Which leads me to a final thought I want to leave you with. Something to mull over as you go about your day. If just 8 weeks of a secular MBSR protocol can physically shrink the fear centers of the amygdala and thicken the empathy centers of the cortex, well, what would human society look like if these practices were integrated into standard childhood education?
That is a staggering thought.
What if we taught the Betty Erickson 3-2-1 technique in kindergarten alongside the alphabet?
It raises a profound evolutionary question. Are we currently living with a default human brain that is actually chronically stressed and structurally underdeveloped compared to its true biological potential?
If the operating table can be painless through focus alone, maybe the rest of our lives can be too.
A truly fascinating possibility to consider.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.